evening. I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. Today is August 10th. As usual, I'm joined by Western Standard news editor Dave Naylor. How you feeling, Dave?
I'm great.
Also joined by Western Standard opinion and broadcast editor Corey Morgan. Corey, you have a good show today?
It was a good show today. They're always good shows.
Always good show. Never bad.
No, some are better than others, but there's never a bad one.
Okay. Well, we've got an interesting show. We're going to be focusing almost entirely on the fallout of the United Conservative Party frontrunners debate hosted by the Western Standard last night. We had Danielle Smith, Travis Taves, and Brian Jean duking it out on stage, the three big frontrunners. There was a lot of fireworks. There was a lot of action. I really enjoyed it. And I think there were a lot of moments that could potentially be inflection points of the campaign. So we're going to be talking about pretty much just the debate, but we'll also might get into Twitter banning the Western Standard for reporting the news. Not even very controversial stuff. Not stuff that anyone even disputes the facts of. Not anything too crazy. But the fact that it's the Western Standard about COVID got us banned by Twitter. So if we have time, we're going to talk about that. Before we get in, though, I want to just take a moment to note one of my all-time favorite sponsors, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. I've been a member of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association for over a decade because I trust them as Canada's leading firearm owners' rights group to protect my rights as a firearms owner. This is the leading organization in Canada that is fighting for your right to own, use, and responsibly be a part of the firearms community in Canada. Our firearms rights are under constant attack by politicians in Ottawa, and without the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, I believe they would have already sent them to your houses to take our guns away. It's absolutely critical that we're backing an organization like the Canadian Shooting Sports Association right now. If you're not yet a member of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, you really, really should be. Check out their website, cssa-clia.org, and you can become a member. It's a very reasonable cost to become a member of them and support the cause of responsible firearms owners' rights in Canada. Okay, so we're gonna get into the debate. We're gonna have a couple clips that we're gonna get into, but before we get into some of the individual moments, don't spoil it, guys. Before we get into individual moments, let's talk more generally. Who won? Who lost? What are your thoughts, Dave?
I don't think anybody lost. There were no big mistakes. I think the big winner was the viewer because they were able to see each candidate clearly spell out their ideas on numerous topics. I think you asked 20 questions or something like that, and it was a good, lively debate. The crowd was into it. The candidates seemed into it. There were some testy exchanges at times. There was some brilliant work by Corey on the time bench. He held the yellow cards up brilliantly.
It's a lot of rehearsal.
And then when they were almost out of time, you had that German salute. You know, it was all practice.
I did not do that.
You did.
No, I put my hand up.
You go back and watch it.
It was not that regimented.
So yeah, I think it was certainly the best debate so far of the UCP, and actually one of the best political debates I've seen in Canada for ages.
Well, I agree entirely. And that's because it was the Western Standard. But yeah, no, I think it was a very lively debate. It was designed that way. When we sat down and figuring out the rules, who's invited, and what are the ground rules for the debate itself. I think what really sets this apart from all, not just UCP debates, I don't want to pick on that, all internal party leadership debates, when they're officially held by parties, the objective is to simply showcase your candidates and make sure that the party's not embarrassed. And that results, I think, in very dull affairs. They're designed not to have much combat. They're not designed to really get in and pin candidates down on the issues. We made sure that the questions here were very pointed. They were tough. I said at the beginning of the debate that if I do my job correctly, all three candidates should probably think I have it out for them. And I hope we achieved that. We had tough questions that really did mix it up. Your general thoughts, Corey?
I'm with Dave on it in the sense, well, for one, it was really outstanding, actually, as a debate to watch. I mean, I got the most cynical critic of them all, and that's Jane, who's sick and tired of politics. But she watched it, And she even said, holy cow, I didn't realize it was a 2-hour debate because it was actually that interesting. It wasn't dragging out. It really engaged the viewer, like not just patting ourselves on the back. The Standard hit it out of the park there. Also, as Dave said, I didn't see a clear loser out of the bunch. There was no knockout punch. I mean, there was a lot of good, fireworks and things going on, but nobody really stood out. They were all solid. If I saw anything complaining is Brian Jean. I mean, I think he was trying to come across as passionate, but it often came across as angry. And, he's known for his temper a bit, and it came out that way, even if unintentional. So that might have soured him a bit on some people watching. But I think all of them kind of kept to where their stances were on the policies. And there was some distinguishing differences between all of them to be seen. So I think it was just good all around, and nobody really won or lost. The crowd seemed to have mostly Smith supporters in it, but that's just a matter of how the room was comprised, not necessarily how they performed.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to point out that I think we were proven right into limiting it to the top three. Mm-hmm. Todd Loewen, who was fourth, did show up, and you introduced him, and he was warmly welcomed by the crowd. But I could not imagine having 8 candidates across that stage, and trying to get some interplay between the candidates. The top 3, the front runners, that's the way to do it.
First of all, we wouldn't even have fit them. Like, it was actually pretty cramped with 3. It's not a huge stage, especially the way it was configured. Unless we wanted them under the band canopy, and that would have looked ridiculous. But I really think it had great. By limiting it, I think it was just so much more meaningful. You had much more time. They didn't have to stick just to their talking points. I expected the first 45 minutes to an hour would be mostly talking points, but then there's enough time that they would get out. These weren't 15-second, 30-second spots. Everyone had a minute on everything, and then we had time for some ad hoc rebuttals in there. So I think it was a good cut and thrust of it. Speaking of Todd Loewen today, he may have already done it, I'm not sure. He is, the campaign actually requested all the questions that I asked during the debate. And he's doing a YouTube or Facebook Live, and he's going to answer them anyway.
Oh, good for
him.
And
I say good for Todd. None of us felt really great about not having Todd on the stage, but just he wasn't measuring up by all of the professional polls, and that's really all we could go by. But I good on him, and so that's something we're going to cover when Todd answers those questions, even though it wasn't at the debate. He's answering them anyway. I think he was a great sport, showing up anyway. He worked the room, so we're going to cover that anyway, and see what would Todd have said if he was there. I think that'll be interesting. Do you think anyone won or lost?
No, as Corey says, no knockout blows. But like I said, I think the viewer an undecided viewer got their money's worth last night. If you were a Danielle Smith supporter, you liked what you saw. If you were a Taves supporter, you liked, and same with Brian Jean. Lots of barbs thrown. It was a feisty debate. Standing room only crowd, probably more than 400 people. It was a good night.
Yeah, we were at fire code, maybe even an inch above it, but don't tell the fire marshal. Okay, well, let's get into some of the debate itself, some of the key moments here. We've Nico here has got some of the kind of the key moments, some of the clips of the highlights. One of the big clashes, as expected, right off the top, was on the Sovereignty Act. Sovereignty Act has dominated the campaign. It's kind of become a referendum on do you support Sovereignty Act or not. Nico, why don't we show that clip from the clashing over the Sovereignty Act?
So all the Sovereignty Act would do is it would put them on notice that we're drawing a line, that we are not going to enforce any federal rules, laws, or regulations that violate the Constitution and our sovereign rights under sections 92 through 95 in the Constitution, or violate the rights of our citizens under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's letting them know that we are going to stop being a junior player in Confederation, and we're going to start being a senior partner. We're putting them on notice.
Thank you.
So the Sovereignty Act, if implemented, I believe would create uncertainty and a lack of predictability. It would have the potential to create chaos within this province and send billions of dollars of capital out of Alberta. Look, yes, the federal government has undermined Alberta's vital economic interests, but why should we create additional chaos? All that will do will send our economy into a tailspin.
All right. Well, that was Danielle Smith, obviously the candidate most prominently supporting the Sovereignty Act. I think Todd Loewen is as well, but otherwise all of the other candidates are opposed. Travis Taves, who's running second in virtually every poll we've seen, him coming back at Danielle Smith. I don't know, Dave, who do you think kind of got the best of that exchange?
Well, and right there, Derek, you see probably the big issue of the campaign at the moment. Danielle Smith on one side, Sovereignty Act, as you said, everybody else on the other side. And it's, I don't, if you're a Danielle supporter, that's red meat for you. Alberta standing up to Ottawa. We're not going to follow your regulations, your silly rules anymore. That's great stuff. And Travis Taves, on the other hand, investment's going to flee. It's going to be an economic disaster. Doesn't get two more stark summaries of the same thing. So, it's judging by just the applause in the room. Danielle won that round.
Corey, the candidates, all the other candidates, save Todd Loewen, have been just really coming at her on the Sovereignty Act. Do you think any of them are breaking through on this? Do you think they're actually landing any blows that are going to be able to knock her off some of the support she's got?
No, because there's a problem that obviously everybody has identified. They know that Albertans are sick and tired of Ottawa's incursions. That's been the main theme of this whole campaign. I mean, this is the most, from an independence point of view, the most open talk I've seen from a party in power on nudging the line of independence movements that we've ever seen. And Smith has put something forward, whether viable or not, that's saying we're going to do something different and we're going to push back. And all Mr. Taves is stuck with is the status quo, saying I'll try to negotiate some more. And to try and say that we're going to drive out investment is a hard case to make when we've lost $600 billion in equalization. We've had oil sands projects shut down. We've had Energy East shut down. We've got them coming for our firearms. Can we really hurt ourselves any more than Ottawa ever would? So it's a tough case. And Brian Jean is focusing very much on autonomy, but he's talking about trying to do it through the courts. Well, we failed over and over in the courts. So whether Smith's plan is workable or not, she's proposing something different. And I think people are going to embrace that. And these guys are going to have to come up with something that's going to feel more solid and at least with a better chance of success than just trying the tried and true and failed.
Yeah, Jean, let's come to him for a second. Jean, throughout the entire debate, on this section as well, but on this section, we didn't put his clip up because he was literally just quoting a section of a Supreme Court act, Supreme Court ruling and the Constitution. So it wasn't really a memorable moment. But throughout the debate, he was always saying, this is why we need to change the Constitution. And he's right in that, you can't really fix Canada without changing the Constitution, but I don't think it's a stretch to say it's impossible to change the Canadian Constitution. It is locked in for all time, and Quebec has a veto. And if Quebec didn't have a veto, it'd just be Ontario. There's just no way to effectively change these things. Do you think he made any headway? He's Danielle Smith has kind of stolen that hardline autonomy and sovereignty poll in this race. And I think with that, a lot of that traditional Wildrose support, Gene's trying to take it back. He's talking a lot about autonomy, but he was talking about changing the Constitution. How do you think he fared, Dave? Do you think that had gained any traction with those watching?
No, I don't think so, Derek. As Corey said, Albertans want action now. We've been to the Supreme Court on the carbon tax. We lost. We tend not to do very well in Supreme Court decisions. And it takes a long, long time. If Brian Jean gets elected as premier, he could be through the next election before the Supreme Court even hears a case. So I don't think it moved the needle at all.
Okay, so Jean and Taves and the other candidates, whenever they're all there, they're all attacking Smith over the Sovereignty Act. And some people think it's bunk, that it's just crazy, it's not going to do anything. Okay, that's not what we're into right now. But at least from a pure political perspective, that's her strength. And one of the primary rules of war in politics is you never fight on the ground of your enemy's choosing. And that is the ground of Danielle Smith's choosing. She wants to fight on that ground. UCP members and voters tend to support it in pretty large numbers. And so it's like, I feel like they're attacking the hard snout of the crocodile on this when they should be focusing on the soft underbelly. And You ask anyone, what's the one big knock against Danielle Smith? It was the December 2014 mass floor crossing that utterly obliterated her political career, almost destroyed the Wild Rose, and did destroy the Progressive Conservative Party, ultimately leading to the election of the NDP. That is where she is soft and vulnerable. And we saw them, I think, for the first time, trying to actually go for that soft underbelly. They haven't really been doing it till now. They did it last night. Nico, why don't we play the clip of that exchange?
And I want to point to Danielle Smith right now because the floor crossing in 2014, I believe, led not only to the end of her immediate political career and that of Jim Prentice, but it led to a setback for this province and for all Albertans in decades, in tens of billions of dollars.
Look, guys, no politician is perfect. But I think we all respect politicians who recognize mistakes, who own up to them, and who apologize. In fact, I think that's part of the reason we're in the problem that we're in right now, is that we've had precious little apologizing for a lot of the errors that have been made in the last 2 years. Now, I have humbly apologized to you for my role in splitting the Conservative movement. I'd ask Mr. Taves to apologize to you for the role he played in locking us down the last 2 years.
Oh, absolutely. You know, as I travel around this province, I absolutely acknowledge that so many of the government decisions were taken in error in the last 2 years. I acknowledge all the loss that Albertans have experienced. And I apologize as part of that COVID cabinet committee, even though I brought a perspective of freedom. I was part of that decision making. I was part of that government, and I'm happy to own that. But here's the reality. When Danielle crossed the floor in 2014, it ultimately took this province to the left. That resulted in an NDP government for our children and grandchildren. That set this province back decades. That's what brought me into politics today. That's what we have to avoid.
Well, okay, so there's kind of, 2.5 parts of that. We're going to deal with the floor crossing one bit, but obviously it's very tied into how she hit back and kind of pivoted the whole thing back to Travis Taves' role in lockdown. So we're going to try to discombobulate these two as much as we can here. So they finally, and actually we didn't show it here, but Brian Jean before that also took some pretty hard shots on Danielle Smith for that, saying, I got into provincial politics to pick up the mess when you crossed the floor for a cabinet seat. Fair shots.
I thought it was actually a good stance on it to point out for himself, hey, you left the mess behind, I saved the party. That was one of the better shots on Jean's part, in a sense of self-promoting and kind of shooting at Danielle at the same time. Yeah,
I think it was one of Jean's stronger moments. This is obviously an extremely vulnerable area for Danielle. She's spent years apologizing, but it was pretty terrible what she did. It got me into politics at the same time as Jean. Do you think, I guess it's kind of tied in with her comeback, but Corey, do you think those blows landed? Obviously, with Danielle's diehard supporters, they have forgiven her. They've moved on, but I'm not sure everyone has. So with people who are on the fence, they're not maybe sure about her. Do you think those blows landed?
I do. And I mean, those who are willing to forgive Danielle have already, as you said. And she's shown contrition on this for years. And I think most people believe it's genuine. With a lot of people, though, the next question is, can you trust her judgment, though? I mean, okay, you're sorry about it. You realize you made a mistake, but you're asking to be put into a very strong position of power. And if you got a tendency for making impulsive mistakes, we can all pay some very big prices for it. So that's where that vulnerability is, as you said, and they're cutting hard. And that's where she is weakest. Those undecideds, those on the fence. If it sounds like she might not make sound decisions as a leader, and that tied in a bit with even some of her off-the-cuff talk, whether it's Sovereignty Act or the cancer issue, they can really, really cut her there. So she's got to make people confident that she'll make reasoned decisions in the future. And I think they're going to keep twisting that knife now that they've seen where they're getting some blood out of her.
Dave, they finally struck for the soft underbelly. Do you think they hit the mark?
A little bit. She's been on a Alberta-wide apology tour ever since she announced she's been running or was going to run for the UCP leadership. You know what? We're talking about events of 8 years ago that you guys are still angry about, you know, when we talk about it. You know, and you as the moderator last night were bringing up stuff that she wrote about in 2015 Calgary Sun or
2020.
2020.
That was 2 years ago.
So that was you know, that's relatively the recent history. She does have a past. She's got to run on that record. You know, I'm like Corey. I think she is contrite. I think she realizes the magnitude of her blunder. You know, and she vows that now she won't make that kind of decision because she's going to listen. She's going to listen more, listen to the MLAs, listen to the people. So I guess that's the question. If you're a UCP voter, do you believe that she's made that change?
Okay, so we're going to pivot now to her response. As we saw in that clip, you know, she says, "I have apologized." She tried, I think, without mentioning him, she kind of tried Ralph Klein a bit, who was famous for eating crow when he needed to. Says, you know, Albertans appreciate when their politicians apologize. And I think you owe Albertans an apology for locking them down over the last 3 years, or something to that effect. That was an interesting turnaround. Corey, do you think that was an effective turnaround? First of all, do you think there was an effective answer from her on the defense over the floor crossing? And do you think it was an effective turnaround with her attack on Taves in particular there?
Yeah, well, it's as effective as her defense for the floor crossing will get. As we said, she's repeated it over and over, and those who will accept it will accept it. Tactically, it was a fine turnaround because it put him on the defensive. It changed the channel a bit and took it away from her and dropped it back onto his own lap. I mean, he had scored, and he came back at it yet again anyways with his response. That's the nature of the back and forth. But at least she turned it into kind of a counter volley rather than just taking some abuse. So tactically, it was good, though. It appeals to different crowds. I mean, there's some people, even in the Conservative Party, the UCP, who thought the lockdowns were correct. So it doesn't necessarily undercut everything Taves did.
I think it was a devastating blow, Derek. This is the albatross that Travis Taves has to wear. He was a member of the Corey, of the not the Corey, the Kenny inner circle. He was a member of the Sky Party dinner scandal. He was a close confidant of Jason Kenney, and he was probably one of the top 2 or 3 people that were making decisions. He was in the COVID cabinet. He was responsible for the lockdowns that came across Alberta on many occasions. He was the decision maker in all this, and this is what he's going to have to wear throughout the entire campaign, is that he was a Kenney crony, and he's got to try and talk himself out from under that. The way he did it last night was, well, you know, I fought for the rural communities while I was in cabinet. I tried my best. Didn't stop the rural communities from being shut down, just like everybody else. So I thought it was a great shot by Danielle.
When I was writing these questions, I figured out pretty quickly that on the Travis Taves questions, I may as well have been asking it of Jason Kenney, because I was more or less just, I felt I had no choice. But essentially, he has to defend the government's record, because first of all, he's the only one who was even an MLA for the whole time, and he was not just an MLA, he was in the cabinet, and a key inner circle of that cabinet. And so I tried. Maybe it's not entirely fair that he has to wear everything Kenney did, but he was right beside him during it. And so the questions, I tried to leave enough that he is still an individual. He is not Jason Kenney. But I felt in many ways he had to defend the record of the government, and that was kind of the role he was in. You know, as you're kind of getting at, he was put in the position, particularly on the COVID questions, of saying, well, you never heard from me publicly because it's cabinet, it's confidential, but I was there secretly behind the scenes, fighting for rural Alberta, fighting for, quote, the perspective of freedom. I don't know. Corey, do you think that held much water? I mean, maybe it could be true. You know, maybe around the cabinet table, he was on one side, but ultimately he was there. But he tried to make the argument that you couldn't hear me because of where I was. But trust me, he pretty much saying it would have been a lot worse if I wouldn't have been at the cabinet table.
It's pretty weak. I mean, he's put in an awkward position. He can't prove it. He can't say how vocal or not vocal he was within cabinet. I mean, we know that the general caucus leaks, but cabinet tends to be pretty tight. So I guess it's just a matter of trust whether you believe him that he was actually actively lobbying that way or not. He's got to wear that government's record, and if we're talking about soft spots for them, as Dave said, that's his. And Danielle, poked right back at where he was weakest.
And the other cabinet ministers running for the job, they have to, wear the same cloak. Schultz and Rajan Sawhney. It's funny if you watch social media and you got Schultz putting out a statement, well, I'm going to fix this. Or Taves putting out a statement, well, I'm going to fix the healthcare system. The immediate response from everybody is, well, why didn't you do it in the 4 years you were in power?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, that's the end of the argument because they don't have an argument. So
their argument is, I wasn't that particular minister. Because to be fair, they weren't the premier in charge of everything. They were in charge of their ministry. Sure,
but Travis Taves was in charge of the money.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, after Kenny, it's Taves.
Yeah.
He's got a tough road to hoe wearing that Kenny yoke.
Yeah. Now, there is one other former cabinet minister running, was not in the inner circle, Leela here. But I suppose her criticism of the government is that it didn't lock down harder. It didn't forcefully vaccinate harder. It didn't mandatorily mask harder. So I suppose she is not wearing the record of the government because she thinks that they were too soft.
Maybe that's why she's polling somewhere around 0.
Yeah. That might have something to do with it.
It's a good campaign platform for the NDP.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of fireworks throughout the whole thing. The last question.
You had to do it, didn't you?
I just kind of felt like a kid with a Molotov cocktail. When else was I going to have the opportunity to do this? I thought we should all end on something that's a bit more unifying, a bit easier. I thought about asking about what they're binging on Netflix or what their favorite band is. Instead, I asked them about abortion. A nice, easy one to finish it on. They're not going to get questions about abortion in official party debates where, as I was saying earlier, the goal is to showcase candidates, not tear it up too much and do anything that might be too controversial. So I figured abortion would be the 10 out of 10 on the other side of that. We did not ask them if they're going to ban abortion or not, because that would be criminal code stuff. That's federal. And we all know what they would say. They're not going to touch it. But we asked them, would they, actually, I think we asked them if they would defund abortion with taxpayers' dollars. That's provincial. And if they would repeal the NDP's bill that they passed, where the UCP refused to vote on it before the last election, that bans people from protesting against abortion in certain areas. Why don't we play the clip on the abortion exchange, Nico?
My view is that we need to be focused on what was it? The original promise was that abortion would be safe, legal, and rare. And I would like to see us spend more time and effort in supporting women to make a different choice with adoption. I think that's the way that
My personal position on abortion, my personal view would put me in the pro-life camp. And I'm happy to legitimize that position every time I'm asked. But I recognize it's a complicated issue, and there's passionate positions held by really good people right across the spectrum.
I am pro-life as well. I lost his child, and I tell you, if you want to be pro-life, that's the situation that'll make you pro-life. And I think that we should do exactly what these two people have said. I've come forward with a concrete plan on this. I think we should. I've done adoptions. They take 2 years, 3 years sometimes to do an adoption where everybody's in favor of it. Why are we doing that? Why are we not providing more supports for the people that are actually doing the adoptions? Let's quicken them up. 3 months. Let's have a special judge do that. I can get that done.
Okay, so on all of the other questions, if a candidate didn't answer the questions directly, I kind of brought them back sometimes. I was like, like we asked Travis Taves, how did you vote on kicking Todd Lowen and Drew Barnes out of the caucus? He didn't answer. And I went back to him and said, you didn't answer the question. You could decline to answer. And then he gave another BS answer. And so, okay, he declined to answer. This one, I appreciate they're going to wiggle. Because unless you're in the left side, the NDP says we want to build abortion clinics on every corner like they're Macs. If you're more on the conservative side, maybe a bit more pro-life, it's a controversial thing to take on. So I allowed a bit more fudging. None of them really directly answered either of the questions on ending taxpayer funding of elective abortions, repealing the NDP's ban on protesting against abortion in Alberta, and then third was, where do you stand on the NDP's call for building abortion clinics on every corner? None of the three actually touched it. Does that surprise you, Dave?
No, not at all. Not at all. The only thing they were seemingly unified on was let's get more adoptions happening. And, to me, that seems like a good thing. The system now is onerous, costly, time consuming. And Brian Jean's right. Why can't it be done in 3 months?
Corey, I want to ask about any individual candidate because they all more or less said the same thing. Let's have more adoption.
I noted two different things in there, actually. Though one of them, and I could be wrong on which one it was. One said they were going to keep that ban because they said it's a heated. I think it might have been Danielle Smith.
Oh, actually,
she said she was going to keep it because it's a divided thing, and it, as the bubble and keeping people back. So she did actually speak directly to that one and said she would keep it. The other ones never addressed it. And something a little further that was surprising out of Taves is he invoked the conscience rights term, which I saw as almost kind of stepping in it because that's a loaded issue. It's an unfair issue, I think, because conservatives have fallen on that, including Danielle Smith in the past.
The 2012 election, yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that Kathleen Smith, with her setup that she did in the past, discovering there were conscience rights in the policy and having a tantrum over it and making it a big issue. When everybody forgets, if you look at the associations, whether it's pharmacists or doctors or nurses, it's all built into it. They already have conscience rights. They are allowed to decline to do procedures or administer things that they feel conflicts with their religious or personal feelings. So it's just, unfortunately, politicians step into it because there's some pro-life groups that are always pushing to have that entrenched in policy, but it's a non-issue. They already have it. And now he said it, it's on the record, and I've already seen it on social media. They're using it to attack. Oh, they're going to bring in conscience rights, and, Joe such and such up in Fort Smith isn't going to be able to get a day after pill or something. So they did make a couple of answers.
See, this is why official party debates don't ask about abortion. Okay, well, let's just get, before we get on to Twitter banning the Western Standard, let's just kind of final thoughts on the debate, Dave.
Great. Let's do another one. No, it was a well moderated. I'm not just saying that because you're my boss.
It's much appreciated.
My mom said it was well moderated. You should give up this job and become a professional
Well, you're just
moderator.
saying that so that you could be the boss. I don't be the publisher anymore.
Right.
I just go moderate things.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
No, it was great. The audience had a great time. The candidates, I think, enjoyed the interplay. So, well done to the candidates. Well done to us.
Yeah. Corey, final thoughts on how the debate went?
Well, likewise, yeah, you, and I don't like giving you compliments, but all the same, no, you moderated it really well, and it kept it on pace, and you didn't take any crap from them. And it set a good bar, because debates, I mean, we've seen so many. Usually when I hear, another debate, I'm political, so I'll watch it, but I'm ready for some droning, and it was really fast-paced, productive, had a lot of content in it. It set the bar for debates. I really think the Western Standard knocked that out of the park.
Well, I hope that the next official UCP debate in Edmonton, that'll be the final official debate. I hope they could, look at this and maybe make it a bit more interesting. And again, I'm not trying to pick on how they did the first one. That's just how parties do debates. Hopefully, we can maybe change how they're doing it. But I'm not optimistic. I think if you want these debates to be good, you have to do it as they do in, say, Republican and Democratic primaries in the States, where different networks or different other media do it. Fox News will do a Republican debate. MSNBC will do the Democrat debate. And they're just so much more lively than our official party debates. They suck. They suck so bad. Okay. Speaking of debate, Twitter says no debate. So just a couple hours ago, I'm just sitting in my office, working away, doing my thing. And a notification pops up. Twitter has banned us. They've locked our account. I was like, oh, crap. Did someone say something stupid? Because,
You immediately thought of
I
Corey.
think it's me.
I immediately
not this
thought,
time.
what the hell did Corey do?
Yes.
It wasn't. It was just some straight news stories. Dave, what the hell happened?
If I knew, I'd tell you. Straight story. The government of Denmark announced this week no more vaccinations for anybody under age 18 because it's been proven that kids don't suffer the same sort of consequences from COVID that older people did.
And that's very controversial medical advice, right?
No, it's a fact.
No one, everyone knows that young people die from COVID just as much as old people.
No, not true, Derek. And we quoted the official Denmark government statement. And I guess Twitter didn't like that and banned us for it. I mean, and the frustrating thing to me is regular media have reported it all over the place and didn't get punished. But for some reason, Twitter decided, I don't know whether they were thinking of making an example of us, but it was literally within moments of when the story was published.
Oh, and before you continue, YouTube and Facebook censors. We are not giving medical advice. Vaccines are good. Vaccines are great. Vaccines will give you wings. COVID bad. Everyone dies from COVID. So just that little thing there. Facebook, YouTube censors. We don't want to get banned from you as well. Again, got that out of the way. There was another story that they cited we got banned for.
Yeah, this was a really good story, a Christopher Oldcorn exclusive from Saskatchewan, where he talked to parents of foster children who the social services department, social service workers, had gone and got the kids vaccinated without even consulting them. And we had at least 2 confirmed cases of that through the parents. And Twitter didn't like that and sort of banned us on top of the Denmark story. So Corey's really pissed somebody off in Twitter headquarters this week. We've filed an appeal. I think we expect to be successful. If not, we're in Twitter jail for 7 days.
I mean, there's been the odd thing that snuck out. I mean, we've got an increasingly large-ish organization here. We've got a lot of reporters. And there's, every once in a while I'll see something and, I'll send you, I'm like, hey, I think we need to add a little more to this story. We need to maybe add some more context. Let's get an opposing, we get more of the opposing side on it. This came up and I looked through the stories and I was scratching my head. I just couldn't find anything. We weren't even talking about vaccine efficacy, and we are not talking about vaccine efficacy, YouTube and Facebook censors right now. We're not even talking about it. These stories don't talk about vaccine efficacy. One was talking about the entirely unchallenged, incontrovertible fact that COVID is not as great a risk for young people. One, okay, not an issue. The other one was parents who say that social services of the Saskatchewan government are taking kids away and vaccinating without the sign-off.
That was good journalism. That was a good story.
That was good. Yeah, it was very good journalism. Chris Oldcorn, our Saskatchewan reporter, tip of the hat to him. That is the kind of thing reporters should be doing, and they're just really not in significant numbers anymore. This wasn't medical advice. This wasn't misinformation. This was just factual. He spoke to real humans who said this is happening, and he verified it's happening. He did his job. I don't know. You got something to say, Corey? What the hell?
They just want to chill the discussion. It's as simple as that. They've taken their side of things. They don't even want it questioned, and they just don't want us to talk about it. Again, if it was an opinion piece, if it was speculation, even if it was a story interviewing somebody who's a bit of a fringe practitioner or something. But this was just news copy, and it's ridiculous, but it shows an agenda of these social media giants. And there's certain issues they do not want discussed, and they will chill it.
I think now they've sort of fended off Mr. Musk. They're flexing their muscles again in censorship.
Yeah. It's bonkers. But that's why we got to do what we got to do. Speaking of which, if you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, you need to be. The Western Standard is one of the only Western headquartered major media in Canada. We refuse to take a penny of the federal government's media bailout subsidies. We don't take a penny. We are funded entirely by 2 sources, advertising and members, our member subscribers. We rely on you. If you become a member, you're going to have unlimited access to all Western Standard content. And we've got reporters right across the West and on Parliament Hill. We've got some of the best opinion writers in the business, some of the best reporters in the business. And with your support, we've been able to grow tremendously over the last year. We're only coming up on 3 years this October. It's incredible how far we've come since working in our basements at the very beginning here. So yeah, if you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandard.news, click on membership, sign up. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year for unlimited content. You can, and actually your trial amounts are like $1 or $2 or something crazy. Okay, Dave, Corey, thank you for joining me today on the pipeline, and thank all of you for joining us today. Have a great evening, and God bless.